121. Halloween dinner is coming. Why Snape? Someone asked blankly. Yeah, why Snape? Avada hung his head too. He knew a little more than most, but that didn't keep him from feeling the same doubts everyone else had. How had this man, standing at Dumbledore's side for over 10 years, supposedly trusted by him, managed to win over those stubborn pureblood families again? Was it the comradeship of those years? Or the dark mark on his hand? Even if Lord Voldemort had fallen, what value did that mark hold now? Many of those governors had been Snape's contemporaries. They all knew about Snape and Lily. In the original story, Snape silenced doubts by personally killing Dumbledore, a deed that crushed dissent. But this time, and if the board's goal after Dumbledore was to eliminate a threat, they should have been done. If they truly wanted to reshape Hogwarts into a school that bred extreme pureblood ideology, as Dumbledore warned, it would make more sense to proceed slowly. Rush changes would spark backlash, just as Umbridge had. If the governors were collectively feverish enough to transform the school at once, why not appoint some obviously loyal new headmaster instead of reinstating Snape, the man who had served Dumbledore faithfully for years and whose loyalties were deeply questionable? These questions nagged Avada until that night, when he returned to his dormitory and found a note tucked beneath his pillow with a bright red feather clipped to it. The handwriting was terse. Lord Voldemort is still in my hands. No need to worry. Professor Snape will do his best to ensure the student's safety, but from his vantage, there are things he cannot see. The rest is up to you. You can trust Professor Snape in critical moments, but try not to show it. The matter is not over. Be careful with everything. Despite the murmurs and the suspicion, Snape had taken the headmaster's seat by the absolute authority of the Board of Governors. He was also temporarily serving as Slytherin Dean and Potions Professor. This year's hiring was done, so a new Potions Master wouldn't be found until next year, meaning Snape could become full-time headmaster later. There was one oddity everyone noticed. Snape hadn't moved into the headmaster's office at Hogwarts. He continued to occupy the Slytherin deanery. Some argued this meant Snape wasn't truly accepted. The castle, they whispered, had its own will and might choose who would truly lead it rather than obeying the governors blindly. At least Snape hadn't upended Dumbledore's rules. The routines and lessons continued on the old rhythm. Quidditch wasn't interrupted. Hogwarts felt outwardly the same. Besides Slytherin's hourglass suddenly spilling points and the annoying crowing sounds disappearing, everything seemed unchanged. But the castle was wrapped in a pall. Professors rarely smiled. Hagrid wept for days. Students went quiet at meals when they saw an old bat perched in Dumbledore's chair. In that mood, this year's Halloween took on special weight. Everyone hoped the feast would lift the gloom. The ghosts, eager to help, were more than willing. According to Nearly Headless Nick, it was the 500th anniversary of his death. He'd also had a personal blow. His application to join the Headless Hunt had been rejected. He was hosting a grand spectral banquet on Halloween to cheer people up, and Snape, perhaps to stabilize his position, adopted Dumbledore's custom. The ghosts would attend the Great Hall feast, provided they didn't drift through the food and chill it. So the Great Hall was divided that night. Down below, the 4 long tables remained, warmed by candles, students laughing and eating under bat and pumpkin decorations. There was even a large bat perched in the headmaster's chair. Above them, though, the scene was different. Hundreds of thin, dark candles hovered at the ceiling, their blue flames casting an eerie light over the white faces of the ghosts. A cloud of at least 100 spirits drifted through the hall, magnificent and cold. Some ghosts floated down to mingle with students, like a gentle, falling snow. "Oh, I remember you, the boy who came over to ask about my cause of death." The fat friar was holding court at the Hufflepuff table, swapping stories with a cluster of ghosts. Many students had joined in. Avada's seat was close by, which is why he wasn't missed when the ghost from the abandoned girls' lavatory found him. "Happy Halloween, Myrtle," Avada said. "Want a piece of pumpkin pie? I heard you can taste food when you pass through it." "Who told you that?" Myrtle raised an eyebrow. "What would I become if all I did was hang around a flushing toilet all day?" Avada set the golden pumpkin pie down gently and pushed away a bowl of lumpy mashed potatoes in pepper sauce. "Hey, Ken, Did you go chase Myrtle down? Hannah, sitting opposite him, noticed and reached for the mashed potatoes he had nudged away. But I thought Myrtle never left that girl's lavatory, she said suspiciously. I had to. Investigate, Avada said with a dry cough, and nudged the pumpkin pie toward Hannah. Eat. Go on. Hannah, not thinking much about the mysterious senior who'd supposedly once sealed Lord Voldemort, simply began to eat. The fat friar floated down toward them, eyes bright. Are you lot interested in how ghosts died? Want to hear how I went? I promise it's better than Nick's story. He's been showing off that neck all evening. If ghosts could get drunk, I'd say he's had too many. Wait, Avada sprang to his feet, startling the table. Myrtle, could you stand next to the fat friar, please? 122. Secret room. Huh? What's wrong? Myrtle and the fat friar both jumped. Seeing Myrtle frozen, the fat friar drifted over and halted beside her, equally puzzled, while Avada closed his eyes and gripped his wand. Don't move. Just a moment, please. His voice trembled. He didn't seem to care about the shocked looks around him as he drew his wand and pointed it at the two ghostly figures. Avada's research into mental magic had focused almost entirely on living minds. He had never looked closely at other spirits. That was why, when he had taken Harry to the abandoned girls' lavatory earlier, nothing had alarmed him. Only now, seeing Myrtle among other ghosts, did a subtle mismatch in her mind register by comparison, and that tiny mismatch could mean a catastrophe. Found it! His face drained of color. Compared to the fat friar, Myrtle's mind contained a small, deliberate alteration. An infinitesimal sliver of memory, maybe only a few milliseconds, had been tampered with. Insignificant among decades of recollection, barely a ripple in an ocean, far subtler than the tiny mark that had fooled Chang. What could a few milliseconds show? More to the point, who would bother to alter a ghost's fragment of memory? Myrtle, could you come out with me for a moment? Avada reopened his eyes, the tension suddenly gone as if it had never been there. I think we need to discuss your death privately. It's not really appropriate for a public place. My cause of death? Didn't you already know it? Myrtle followed him out, puzzled. And what's so terrible about talking about my cause of death? It's the only remarkable thing in my dozen or so years, dying inexplicably in the lavatory. Who else could have done that besides me? They slipped out of the clamorous great hall into the quiet corridor. The noise from inside drifted through the cracks like a distant world. Avada raised his wand again and, voice low, ordered, "Don't move." What's wrong? Myrtle startled at the wand, but relaxed. Ghostly forms were hardly affected by most spells. Still, she pulled her head in nervously. Your memory seems off. Yes, exactly. Don't move. Avada extended his mental power carefully to the abnormal point in Myrtle's mind and began the painstaking work of restoring that tiny altered fragment. Even though it was only milliseconds long, he took his time until the memory settled back into its most natural pattern. Is it done? Myrtle blinked. You've been holding your wand there ages, and I don't feel any different. That's because the change was minuscule. Avada sheathed his wand and fixed his gaze on her. Now recall it again. How did you die? Myrtle frowned, thinking slowly. I was hiding alone in the lavatory, crying, and then I suddenly died. Wait, didn't I tell you last time I felt dizzy too? Sorry, I must be remembering wrong. Before you died? Did you see anything strange? Avada's palms were suddenly cold with sweat, but he gripped his wand all the same. Now that you mention it, yes, I remember something unusual. It seemed to be a pair of enormous eyes? Avada was silent for a beat, then sighed long and low. Damn it. He ran, straight for the abandoned lavatory. Who arranged this? He muttered as he went. A diary? Pure-blood conspirators? Or something else? How would they know someone would be investigating the Chamber of Secrets on the first day of term? Pushing the door open and stumbling inside, he realized he couldn't simply flee the way he had thought to. From the soul perspective, his magic now revealed the small snake emblem, not just a simple glyph, but a layer cake of intricate, precise structures. Beneath those layers, something like a hidden space was folded away. Worse, the parts of that structure that linked to the snake, the mechanism that should respond to Parseltongue and open the chamber, bore traces of deliberate alteration. I should have thought of this earlier. He sank to his knees, one hand to his forehead. If Salazar Slytherin could inherit Peveril research and write Parseltongue into the soul as an inherited talent, then of course, if he wanted an absolutely secret place, he would use soul magic to hide it. The chamber's opening conditions have been modified. That's why Harry's Parseltongue didn't get a response on the first day. But that was only the first day of school. He stared at the sink for a long moment, then shook his head. Never mind. The priority is to decipher the enchantment on the chamber entrance and remove any hidden dangers as quickly as possible. He wondered aloud if the hiding charm shared properties with the Fidelius charm and cursed softly. He needed to contact Dumbledore. If only he'd discovered this before Dumbledore left. He debated whether to tell Snape. Dumbledore had said he could only truly trust Snape at critical moments. But the decision spun in his mind as he rubbed his temples and pushed out of the lavatory. This was going to mean long, sleepless nights. He would have to immerse himself in the structure of the Resurrection Stone and the chamber's enchantments, study soul-related magic until he could read it like ink. He'd be spending a worrying amount of time in a girl's lavatory and not during the day. Why did things have to get more complicated after Lord Voldemort was sealed? He grumbled as he turned back toward the Great Hall for one last respite. Then he saw them, Argus Filch and Mrs. Norris. They stood in the middle of the corridor, frozen mid-step like statues, eyes wide and fixed straight ahead. Basilisk. A darkness slipped across Avada's vision and he almost went down. The plan had been staggeringly precise. At the start of term, someone had tampered with Myrtle's memory and changed the Chamber of Secrets password, tricking him into believing the chamber no longer existed. Then, using the pretext of an Urkling attack, they removed the powerful Dumbledore and made the chickens in the portraits disappear. Only after those pieces were in place did the basilisk begin to act openly. This time, it petrified people without leaving the usual message. No, the Chamber of Secrets has been opened, and that erased a crucial clue. His explanations would be written off as speculation until he actually broke into the chamber and proved it himself. Two frozen figures stood before him now like silent mockery. Your actions mean nothing to me. Footsteps suddenly thundered down the corridor. Instinctively, Avada drew his wand and looked up. Three familiar shapes tore around the corner. Ken? Harry stopped first, pale with recognition. Ron and Hermione skidded to a halt behind him, and then their eyes took in the even more familiar sight beside Avada. Filch? Wait, he doesn't look right. It's worse than not right. Avada's voice came out hoarse. I was too late. Filch has been attacked. Attacked? The trio took a step back. What happened? He's been petrified. Why are you running this way? Oh, Harry. Ron looked at Filch's statue with a new edge of fear, then turned to Avada. He's been moaning about hearing strange voices for days. At the feast just now, he said he heard it again and ran off. Hermione and I followed. What did you hear? Avada asked. A cold, murderous voice. Harry shivered. It didn't speak proper sentences, only these vague roars, words like hungry and kill came through. But Ron and I didn't hear anything. Hermione added, I don't know what to make of it. Avada sighed. The voice you heard probably belongs to a dangerous creature that's wandering Hogwarts. Don't go chasing it. If you hear it again, run to a crowded place or find a professor. A monster in Hogwarts? They exchanged worried looks. Hermione spoke up at last. What kind of creature can lurk in the castle and petrify people from a distance? I've studied fantastic beasts and I don't remember anything like that. That's because, Avada began, then froze. There was no standing water nearby, no mirrors, and Filch wasn't wearing glasses. So why had he been petrified and not killed? And Harry's description, vaguely roaring, wasn't how a basilisk behaved in the accounts Avada knew. Had something altered the basilisk too? I'm not entirely sure, he admitted finally. My guess came from what Hagrid told me. If you want a clearer explanation, ask him. Right, we shouldn't just stand here. Filch is still petrified. A low rumble from the end of the corridor signaled the feast breaking up. Hundreds of students climbing stairs, voices and laughter spilling through the castle. Avada shook his head. I need to find Professor Snape and tell him. You should leave. This is dangerous, and you don't want to get caught up in it. Snape? Harry started to protest, but the footsteps drew nearer and the trio hurried off. I'll go find Professor McGonagall. Good. Avada watched them go, then moved away through an empty staircase straight for the Slytherin common room and the dungeons. Snape wouldn't still be lingering at dinner. He'd likely be attending to his own duties. He knocked sharply on the black oaken door of the Slytherin dean's office. A gust of cold air ruffled his hair as the door opened and Snape's sallow face appeared. "Ken?" the professor said, brow knit. "I should have been at the feast, Professor, but may I come in? I need to tell you something." Avada stepped inside and shut the door. He lowered his voice. "Professor, Filch was petrified in the third-floor corridor just now." Snape stiffened. "I understand." He was silent for a long beat. "I will handle it. Thank you for informing me, Mr. Ken. Professor, I think," Avada began. "I suspect a snake did the petrifying." "Enough," Snape snapped, flaring up. "I said I will handle it. Do not interfere." His voice was sharp and impatient. "Leave my office at once." Avada frowned and glanced around with his sensing charms. There was no one else in the room and nothing eavesdropping. "Professor, I know you. Do not waste my time." Snape stood abruptly, rolling up his sleeves in a gesture more like a threat than an invitation to stay. The message was clear. "Go." Avada swallowed and obeyed. As he left, his eyes caught the faint, thin, burn-like marks coiling around Snape's forearm, the telltale sign of an unbreakable vow. The pieces clicked into place. That was how Snape had the board's confidence. That was why Dumbledore had said Snape could only be trusted at a critical moment. "Ken, I'm here." It had been 2 days since the Halloween party. Ken Avada sat in the corner of an empty classroom, chin propped on his hand, eyes half closed against the pale morning light as he brooded. The classroom was quiet until the old wooden door creaked open and the sound of rusty hinges filled the room. Baron stepped in, face serious, paused to glance around, and then spotted Ken tucked away in the corner. He raised a hand in greeting. "Harry and the others aren't here yet?" "Not yet. He's young. He needs more sleep." Baron snorted and played along, relaxing the stiff atmosphere a little. He found a seat by the window, pulled a chair closer, and leaned against the wall, keeping a watchful eye on the door. A few minutes later, Cedric and Cho entered together. "Harry's not here?" "No. Young people need more sleep," Ken repeated. Cedric shook his head. "I envy them. I remember my second year. I could sleep like a log and not worry about anything. Now it's all old owls on my mind." Cho looked uneasy, as if sensing something off but unable to name it. "Why did you call us here? Yesterday you were being weird, sending messages through the mental link." Ken's expression tightened. "I have something to ask of you. It's complicated and it might be a little scary, but don't worry. What I'll ask you to do isn't dangerous. Otherwise I wouldn't have called you." "To be honest, I didn't want to involve you," he added softly. "But I'm out of my depth. This concerns the safety of everyone at Hogwarts." The room went silent. Baron was the first to react. "Are you planning to investigate the student petrifications yourself?" Everyone remembered. Filch and Madame Norris had been found petrified in a corridor on Halloween night. Over the next 2 days, more students had been struck by an invisible force, and there were 4 victims so far. At first, people assumed pranks. Panic only grew when Professor McGonagall confirmed she couldn't reverse the magic. Headmaster Snape had not been seen since inspecting the scene and hadn't taken any real action beyond warning students not to wander at night and to move in groups. Ken gave a rueful smile, about to tell them to hold their questions, when the door opened again and Harry, Hermione, and Ron hurried in. "Sorry, we're late," Harry said, breathless. Ken stood and went to the center of the room. He drew his wand and, with quick, precise movements, cast silencing and soundproofing charms on the doors and windows before sheathing it again. "Luckily, I was able to call representatives from all 4 houses," he said. "Otherwise, this would be much harder." He cleared his throat and met their faces. His voice dropped. "I may know the root cause of the petrifications." "What?" "You know," Harry began. "Let me finish." Ken cut in and made a calming hand gesture. "If I'm not mistaken, the culprit is a basilisk." A ripple of alarm ran through the room. Ken continued, steady and unhurried. "A basilisk is an extremely dangerous creature, danger rating XXXXX. It looks like a 50-foot python. It has 2 lethal traits. Its venom is essentially instantly fatal, and its gaze kills anyone who looks into its eyes directly. If someone sees its eyes through a medium, glass, a mirror, water, or through a reflection, they don't die, but they are still attacked. That attack manifests as petrification, which is what we are seeing. Hermione's hand shot up. If it's 50 feet long, how has no one noticed it? That's practically the length of a corridor. It's moving through the abandoned piping, Ken said, jaw tightening. The rumor was that Erklings infiltrated the pipes and that the investigation team handled it. That was a cover, specifically to hide the presence of a basilisk so it wouldn't be suspected. Cedric whistled low. You mean the Board of Governors planned this? And those earlier fainting incidents were part of it? Ken's face went grave. The fainting incidents look like the work of someone connected to the Board of Governors, but I can't be certain about the basilisk's direct involvement yet. It could be someone on the board or something using the board as a cover. How did you confirm any of this? Cho asked, worried. I don't mean to doubt you, Ken, but that's a huge claim. There are many ways to cause petrification. I'm basing this on two sources. One is Harry, and the other is the ghost Myrtle. Harry blinked. Me? Ken ignored Harry's blank look and pressed on. Myrtle was a student who died at Hogwarts over 50 years ago. Her death led to Hagrid's expulsion. In her dying memory, she saw a pair of enormous eyes. That memory had later been altered, which is why when Harry and I looked into it before we didn't uncover the truth, I had to dig in deeper to piece it together. And Harry, Ken added, turning to him, even you may not have realized what it meant. You're a Parselmouth. Those cold voices you heard before Filch was petrified were from a basilisk. Parseltongue? Hermione, Baron, Cedric, and Cho reacted with shock. Ron nearly toppled from his chair. You can talk to snakes, someone blurted. That's not common, Hermione said in a low voice. Very few wizards can speak to snakes. The most famous was Salazar Slytherin. Ken nodded. Harry followed a strange voice right to where Filch was attacked. So that's how it is, Baron said, nodding. I think I understand. So what are you going to do? Try to eliminate that basilisk. Now that you know its habits and is roaming the abandoned pipes, you can take the initiative. And with the professor's help, Cedric added. Not yet. Avada shook his head. In the astonished silence, he began to explain slowly. The narrow, dark pipes are basically the basilisk's home ground. Combined with the creature's lethality, it's far too dangerous for just a few professors to confront. And right now, we can't assemble a large enough force to sweep the tunnels. Why not? If something like this happened, the Board of Governors and the Ministry wouldn't just sit on their hands, would they? How would they explain it otherwise? Cedric frowned. Do you remember how Snape became headmaster? Avada didn't answer immediately. He asked a question that seemed unrelated, then answered it himself. He bypassed Professor McGonagall, the deputy, and the board unanimously appointed him as headmaster. That is unusual, Baron agreed. But what does that have to do with the basilisk? Snape knows about the basilisk. What? Voices rose around the table. On the day Filch was attacked, I went straight to Snape to tell him, hoping to hint at the basilisk so he could prepare. And do you know what happened? The moment I said basilisk, he exploded and kicked me out of his office. While he was doing it, he rolled up his sleeve on purpose. I saw several very fine burn marks on his arm. Baron and Cedric went pale. Avada drew a breath, then spoke the harsh truth. Those were the marks of an unbreakable vow. If he broke it, he would die. Silence fell for a long moment. Dumbledore told me before he left, Avada continued slowly. He said Snape would do everything to protect the students and that I could trust him in a critical moment. A critical moment. Hermione lowered her head, voice soft. Does that mean Snape made the vow for something that could cost him his life? We have to find out what vow he made. Harry sprang to his feet. At the very least, we need to make sure he isn't forced to act in a way that would require breaking it. We have to save him. Ron nodded grimly. Cedric and Cho looked equally determined. Don't rush into it, Harry, Baron said calmly. You must be careful with a vow like this. Rash probing could backfire and pull you in. First, let's hear what Ken has to say. And don't forget, Dumbledore is still here. Baron's words helped the group steady themselves. They turned to Avada with anxious eyes. You don't need to worry about the vow. Dumbledore will find a way, Avada said, trying to reassure them as much as himself. His voice was steadier now. What I mean is that we can't directly confront the basilisk yet. For one thing, we don't have any force guaranteed to eliminate it. For another, the basilisk is only a weapon, one that petrifies. Killing the creature would likely alert whoever controls it and drive them into hiding. Catching the one who commands the basilisk is the real solution. And what we can do now, and why I called you here today. He reached into his robe, pulled out a pouch, and set it on the table. He opened it to reveal a neat row of small boxes. We need to let more students know about the basilisk and teach them how to protect themselves. The basilisk has a very exploitable weakness. It is terrified of a rooster's crow. That sound is deadly to it. So that's why there were so many roosters in the paintings at the start of the year, Harry blurted, echoing what others were thinking. Dumbledore knew about the basilisk all along. Avada didn't elaborate. He took out the boxes and opened them one by one. In the first was a pair of glasses. These can save you from the basilisk's gaze. They're mainly for younger students. Anyone with a bit of transfiguration skill could make their own, but this will help those who can't. From the next box, he produced a small badge. This stores the sound of a rooster crow. Press it, and it plays the sound. He squeezed the badge, and a clear but not very loud rooster crow sounded. Wearing this while you move about might deter the basilisk. It sounds a little ridiculous until you remember the basilisk's fear of roosters. I want you to persuade the people around you to wear the glasses and badges and to spread the word about the basilisk as widely as possible. You represent the 4 houses. If you work together, the news should travel quickly. This is the best way we can protect the students right now. I've already asked my roommate Shabi and the others to do the same, Harry said, but we don't know many older students yet. Cedric, I'm counting on you. Cedric nodded, stuffing several boxes of badges into his robe. We could also invite Myrtle to tell the younger students how terrifying the basilisk's gaze is. If she doesn't take offense, Cho suggested, taking a few boxes and thinking out loud. I can show I can speak Parseltongue and tell people I can hear the basilisk's voice, Harry added excitedly. I can keep reminding everyone that if they hear anything, they should close their eyes and get away. Watching students from all 4 houses exchange ideas and plan how to protect Hogwarts, Avada felt an unexpected lightness. He smiled. I hope our efforts will save more students. As for the rest, leave it to Dumbledore. The group nodded in unison, and one thought he kept to himself. Late at night, in the Slytherin Dean's office, the fire in the hearth burned bright, throwing the only real light and warmth across that cold, damp room and lending a faint air of comfort to the gloom. Severus Snape sat in a high-backed leather chair by the flames, but there was no sign of ease about him. He leaned forward, staring into the fire with a tension that made one feel he might topple into the blaze at any moment. Boom! The flames leapt up without warning, forcing Snape to squint. When his vision cleared, a face had formed in the firelight, hazy and exacting, watching him as if waiting for him to speak. Some students have already learned about the basilisk, the face said. Snape's voice was tight, like rotted wood being forced to speak. And the news is spreading fast. It won't be long before the crowing of those roosters echoes down every corridor, just as it did when they were still kept in the paintings. Thank you for the report, Severus. The face's tone was low and even. Can you confirm whether Dumbledore or his supporters leaked the basilisk rumor? No trace of Dumbledore has been found. By all accounts, he's demoralized and on holiday in France. Snape shook his head. As for the other professors, I doubt many of them even know a basilisk exists. Several complained to Dumbledore when he insisted on putting those roosters into the portraits. Are you certain Dumbledore knew about the basilisk from the start? How would he have managed that? To be frank, we cannot fully confirm it either. The face seemed to shake its head. Apart from the odd roosters, he took no other measures against the basilisk. Given that old madman's eccentricity, it would not be surprising if he did something inexplicable for no reason. However, the face continued, according to Master, Dumbledore has definitively confirmed the basilisk's existence. The current apparent calm is still the result of the confusion caused by the fainting incidents. Master's wisdom is unfathomable. Snape could not keep a note of reverence from his voice. Naturally, the voice in the flames carried the hint of a smile. Only Master can bend Dumbledore even after he has lost his power. Of course, that would be impossible without the loyalty of his servants. Wouldn't you agree, Severus? It is my honor. Snape lowered his gaze. Heh, let us return to the matter at hand. Anything further to report about the basilisk rumor spreading? Yes. The face grew serious. Our plan has suffered a significant unforeseen setback. Ironclad evidence of the basilisk's existence has been preserved. The ghost that the basilisk killed saw its eyes before dying. Her testimony has made the basilisk's existence far more credible. Even some professors are beginning to take the rumor seriously. I will inform Master of this. There was a pause. The face spoke again. I have also been told by my daughter that there is someone at the school who speaks Parseltongue and can directly sense the basilisk. This person is another major reason the basilisk was exposed. You mean Harry Potter? I think that is nonsense. Snape sneered. That boy is as arrogant and hungry for attention as his father. He probably picked up the word Parseltongue somewhere and announced himself. Does he deserve the same talent as Master? A talent of the Slytherin bloodline would not appear so easily elsewhere. The face nodded. As for the rumor spreading, do not worry. Continue with the original plan. Continue with the original plan? Snape frowned. Do you have any idea what it will mean for me if the basilisk is crowed about through the corridors? Do you expect me to suffer the backfire of the unbreakable vow? No, Severus. Trust Master, the face whispered, all mystery. Master anticipated every contingency that might jeopardize the plan and prepared for them long ago. Do you remember when the investigation team, after dealing with the Erklings, inspected and thoroughly sealed that old piping system? Snape's expression shifted to one of reluctant recollection. At that time, the voice continued, an agent acting under Master's orders found the basilisk in the pipes and performed specific safety measures, focusing on its eyes and ears. The basilisk's auditory organs were enchanted with a charm that helps it filter out rooster crowing. Of course, Master took your advice during that process and added a transparent shield over the basilisk's eyes. That prevents its eyes from being targeted by spells like the Eye Blight curse, and it keeps the creature from killing people outright, which should reduce your burden. Snape was silent for a long moment, then let out a genuine, low sigh. Master is extraordinary. This way, students will soon discover that rooster crowing cannot stop the so-called basilisk at all, and their confidence in the story will waver. Then, with you and the headmaster releasing the official word, the plan will be halfway completed. By the way, can you enter the headmaster's office now? Not yet. Snape shook his head. Although I know the password, the headmaster's office won't admit me. The chamber will of Hogwarts Castle has not acknowledged me. The chamber will, the face sneered faintly. Never mind. As long as you remain in the principal's position, that is what counts. In dealing with the wizarding world, the Board of Governors' authority is far more useful than that so-called chamber will. I understand, but I remain uneasy about Dumbledore. I do not believe he would completely abandon everything and go off on a holiday like that. That is not for you to ponder. Your duty is to cooperate with Master's actions at Hogwarts for now. The face's tone hardened. Dumbledore's whereabouts are difficult to trace, but as long as that person is protected, every exertion Dumbledore makes will be in vain. Who is that person? Snape's brows drew together. Anger tightened his voice. Don't think I'm ignorant of your tricks, Parkinson. This is the umpteenth time you've mentioned that person in front of me. Are you so fond of testing me? Isn't the unbreakable vow enough to prove my loyalty? Either tell me who he is, or stop mentioning it and upsetting me. Calm down, Severus. The phantom of Robert Parkinson softened a touch. No one doubts your loyalty, but Master has ordered that this person's identity remain a strict secret. Even we on the board know only the name. We cannot contact him, nor do we know where he is. Suffice it to say, he is the greatest contributor to Master's return to power. Aside from Master's own wisdom, the progress of our plan has depended on the information he provides. All right, that should be enough for you. Parkinson's voice grew remote. Continue your task. We will one day welcome Master's glory descending once more. The voice faded like the flames in the hearth, the fire dwindling until only a thin smile of embers remained. The last of the light winked out in the underground office, leaving only a pale moonbeam slanting in from the lake to touch half of Snape's face, making him look all the more grim. 127. Deteriorating situation. Cough! Cough! Blesh! It felt as if 10,000 ants were crawling out of his throat. A vicious itch, a choking blockage, and the feeling of something foreign in his airway forced Avada into a violent fit of coughing. He snatched a handkerchief to his mouth and coughed up thick, blood-streaked phlegm. His face went ashen. Then a warm wetness touched his lips. He wiped it with his sleeve and found a dark, reddish-brown stain spreading across the fabric. Damn it, I've reached my limit. He pried his bloodshot eyes open, drew his wand, and tapped his nose to halt the nosebleed. He aimed the wand at his temple and muttered a soft charm. Gradually, color returned to his face. I can't keep taking the wit-sharpening potion and the invigoration potion. If I do, the after-effects will be a nightmare. But there's no time. There's really no time. More than half a month had passed since he'd asked Harry and his friends to spread the word about the basilisk and hand out the rooster-crowing badges. But students were still being attacked and petrified, and at an alarmingly increasing rate. Many students had started doubting the warnings and stopped wearing the ridiculous badges. After revealing his ability to speak Parseltongue, Harry had asked Professor McGonagall to let him join the prefect's patrols, hoping to do more to protect Hogwarts. In the past weeks, however, Harry had only caught the basilisk's sound a handful of times, fleeting echoes, impossible to follow. Meanwhile, as the number of victims rose, people noticed a pattern. Every petrified student was Muggle-born. The caretaker, Argus Filch, was the only exception, but he was a squib, practically Muggle. That fact made teachers and students increasingly convinced the attacker was not a monster. Why would a beast single out Muggle-borns? The prevailing theory hardened. This was the work of an extremist pureblood faction, a retaliatory strike after Dumbledore's departure. Once that idea took hold, Slytherin students became targets of suspicion. Everyone knew Slytherin contained the most extreme pureblood families. Some believed those nobles could produce dark artifacts capable of the petrification curse even McGonagall couldn't undo. As a result, several Slytherin students, already ostracized, lost their tempers in arguments and openly declared support for whoever was responsible. Some even tried to imitate the basilisk. Their clumsy Petrificus Totalis attempts were immediately reversed by a professor, and one imitator was now doing 6 months' detention. The atmosphere of mutual distrust only fed the problem. In just this short stretch of weeks, nearly 1/10 of Hogwarts' Muggle-born population had been petrified. At this rate, half a year could see them wiped out, and the attacks were increasing in frequency. Avada could no longer prioritize the Horcrux diary. Right now, he had to do everything he could to force open the Chamber of Secrets, then get in touch with Dumbledore and have him bring Fawkes to kill the basilisk. As for the Horcrux, once he had time to study the diary's confession effect, he could still handle the soul fragment, even if it ran to the moon. But soul magic, it's so difficult. He rubbed his temples and staggered out of the bathroom, stumbling down to the second floor. Once he was away from the bathroom, he dispelled his disillusionment charm and pressed his back to the wall to catch his breath. He didn't dare use the Chi Tianya curse just now. If he lost control, he might freeze or suffocate himself in the spatial interstice. Ken, you're here? Great. Harry? Avada forced his eyelids open and blinked up at Harry's excited face. Ron and Hermione stood behind him. They weren't in patrol mode. We were just looking for you. Harry bounded down 3 steps and then stopped when he saw Avada. You're still. Yes. No progress yet. I'm anxious too. Avada sat up slowly. What do you need me for? It's not that urgent. You probably need rest more than. Ron began, but then pointed at Avada and faltered. Honestly, you look terrifying. Your face is so pale, like something out of a horror tale. Your skin looks awful. That's from long-term overuse of the invigoration potion, Hermione said, worry in her voice. I suggested he cut back. His energy is shot. Avada rubbed at his dry eyes and forced his shoulders back to seem a little steadier. I can still help with less strenuous things. Tell me what you need. The 3 exchanged glances. Finally, Harry asked, hesitantly, do you know where we can get African tree snake skin and bicorn horn? You want to make polyjuice? Avada began, before Hermione clamped a hand over his mouth. Quiet, she hissed. We went through a lot to get that forbidden book. Avada blinked. You actually obtained a forbidden book legally? He sounded genuinely surprised. All right, but what do you need it for? We think Malfoy and Parkinson are suspicious, Harry said in a low voice. We want to turn into Crabbe and Goyle and question him. Draco Malfoy and Pansy Parkinson. Avada raised an eyebrow. Why them? Harry's voice dropped further. Malfoy's changed. Before the petrification started, he'd become withdrawn, shrunken, really, quiet and timid, not bothering anyone. After Filch was petrified, he flipped, suddenly arrogant and aggressive, always saying muggle like it's a slur, provoking anyone from other houses. Pansy's been right there with him. It was before we knew all the victims were muggle-born, so maybe Malfoy and his friends knew something. Avada's expression darkened. The dueling club had already hinted at something odd about Malfoy, but this pattern was worrying. He couldn't ask the Bloody Baron. Baron was currently being shunned by certain Slytherins, and anyone who knew Baron's views wouldn't lower their guard near him. Both of those ingredients can be bought in Diagon Alley, about 15 galleons. Here's the shop address. He pulled out a piece of parchment, scribbled an address, and handed it to Harry. But those ingredients are rare. Ordering will take 2 or 3 days. Avada actually had a quicker solution. He could take direct control of Malfoy and use legilimency to strip the secrets from his mind, or Imperio Crabbe and Goyle into finding Malfoy and extracting information that way. He had no intention of doing it. That was too extreme. If he started dispensing his own brand of private justice, he could easily slide into becoming a dark wizard without even noticing. Besides, in his judgment, Draco Malfoy probably didn't know that much. Lucius might know something, but it would be limited, perhaps less than what Avada already suspected. Lucius Malfoy was a villain, but he loved his family. He wouldn't willingly let his son handle something as dangerous as a Horcrux. Thank you. Harry took the note and spoke solemnly. We'll do our best. Good luck. Avada nodded. It would take 3 or 4 days for the letter to arrive and for the materials to be sent, and brewing polyjuice required a lot of time. By the time they were ready to act, the Christmas holidays would almost be over. Who knew what could change in that time? So Harry's request felt more like a tentative, low-stakes move. It would be good if they found anything, but it wasn't essential. The main efforts were Dumbledore's maneuvering in secret and Avada himself trying to crack the Chamber of Secrets. Speaking of Dumbledore, Avada wondered what the headmaster was doing. Dumbledore had cut off all news of himself. The last time Avada had tried to send a letter, the owl had arrived back shaking its head. The papers had printed nothing on his whereabouts. Knowing Dumbledore, Avada was sure the wizard was secretly preparing something big. He wasn't one to sit on his hands after a setback. Oh, right. Avada clapped his hands as if to rouse himself. I can also recommend a good place to brew, safe and hidden. Polyjuice is a restricted potion and takes ages. You don't want to be making that in public, do you? What place? The 3 of them looked intrigued. They'd been planning to brew in the abandoned girls' lavatory on the 3rd floor, but Ken, mysterious and usually reliable, offering a location was exciting. Come with me. Avada rubbed his ears, then led them up to the 8th floor. He wasn't surprised to be recommending the Room of Requirement again. He just didn't relish 3 rowdy students bubbling and stirring next to him while he worked on the chamber. Besides, since he'd learned the undetectable extension charm and developed the Ji Chi Tian Ya curse, the room had been less useful to him personally. It's here. Remember this spot, on the wall opposite the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy being clubbed by a troll. He pointed to a stretch of blank wall. One of you walk back and forth in front of it 3 times while thinking silently, I need a room suitable for brewing potions. Can we just think it silently? Hermione asked. She was the first to pick up on something. Does that mean if we think of other things, different rooms will appear? Wow, Harry and Ron answered before she'd finished the question. As Hermione walked back and forth, a spacious room unfolded for them. Cupboards and cabinets, shelves full of supplies, workbenches and sinks, everything a brewing team could want. They stepped inside, touching things with delighted faces. The room's magic is for you to explore, Avada said, smiling and rubbing his forehead. I need to lie down, or I'll probably faint. Oh, sorry. I'll be off. Best of luck. He didn't hang around as the trio examined the room of requirement. He went down the stairs alone, hand on the banister, thoughts returning to the chamber. The basilisk attack meant the diary had awakened and was back at school, in a student's hands. It couldn't be a professor. None of the staff showed signs of strange soul fragments or mental influence, not even Lockhart. So Lucius had still covertly gotten the diary into the school through a pupil. What part was he playing now? Was he like in the original story, thinking Voldemort's power was gone and simply trying to discredit Dumbledore? Or was he colluding with the diary itself? Were the faintings engineered by the Board of Governors connected to the diary? Had the board acted alone to drive Dumbledore away, or had they conspired with the diary? If it was the latter, things would be much worse. The diary would have the backing of the entire stubborn pureblood faction. And who had tampered with Myrtle's memory and changed the chamber's password on the first day? Could the diary do that? How would it know someone would immediately find the chamber's location? If not the diary, who else could have done it? His thoughts scattered. At the same time, he kept one hand on his magic sense, alert for any sign of the basilisk. He was Muggle-born, well within the danger range. Yet oddly, in the past 2 weeks, he had found no trace of it. Harry's Parseltongue had heard the basilisk's voice now and then, so why hadn't Avada picked up any signs? Was even the basilisk wary of the killing curse? It took him nearly 5 minutes to reach the Hufflepuff common room. He pushed through a noisy crowd clustered around the notice board, returned to the dormitory, drew back the covers, and collapsed into bed. Hey, wait, what are all those people gathered around the notice board for? That was his last stray thought before darkness took him. The feeling of the pillow under his head cut off the rest. His mind slipped into silence. Ken? Someone shook his shoulder. He blinked open his eyes to Summers's anxious face. What's wrong? Avada mumbled, still half asleep. The assembly. Did you see the notice board? Summers was almost breathless. Snape says he's discovered the source of the petrifications and is calling an assembly for all students and staff tonight. He's invited most of the Board of Governors, and the Minister for Magic is here. Huh? 129. The 128th picture is poor, but you can see it. The 128th picture is poor, but you can see it. Avada woke with a start, the last of his drowsiness gone in an instant, and almost dragged Summers with him toward the Great Hall. What's happening? He whispered as they hurried along. Snape's going to announce something about the basilisk? Summers answered. But didn't he already know about it? Why announce it now? With the Board of Governors and the Ministry involved, and that unbreakable vow he made, this must be a directive from the governors, Avada muttered, glancing at the procession moving ahead. Why today? Christmas is next week. What else is different? They reached the doorway. More than half the students were already seated at the 4 house tables. The staff sat at the high table. Only the very central chair was empty. A row of extra seats had been added beside the staff table and occupied by 8 members of the Board of Governors. A middle-aged, portly man in a sumptuous purple robe was whispering with them. Cornelius Fudge, Minister for Magic. Avada and Summers slid into their seats at the Hufflepuff table. Cedric, who sat beside Avada, nodded toward the minister. He hasn't been to Hogwarts since he first took office, Cedric said quietly. If he's here now, it means something serious. An XXXXXX level, ultra-dangerous magical creature loose in the castle and students being attacked isn't exactly a small matter, Avada said. He couldn't help glancing around. He didn't come last time during that mass unconsciousness either. By the way, do you still think it's a basilisk? Cedric frowned. Your theory makes sense, but look at the facts. Students without glasses were only petrified, not killed. The rooster's crow didn't work, and the attacks were selective. How does that look like an animal? Harry heard the sound of a snake, Avada countered. But he couldn't stop it then. Maybe he was hearing ordinary snakes. They aren't unheard of in Hogwarts. There's no point arguing now. Yeah, let's just listen to what Snape has to say, Cedric agreed, studying Avada's expression, but saying no more. Minutes ticked by. Then a figure in a wide black robe glided through the side door and strode to the head table. Severus Snape sat in the headmaster's chair. His robes trailed like a dark mist. His presence was as severe as a shadow. He rose, raised a hand, and the hall fell silent as if a spell had fallen. His voice was low but carried clearly in the hush. Draco dormiens nunquam titilandus. He let the old-school motto hang there. This phrase warns against crossing boundaries, against actions that seem small but are terribly dangerous and have grave consequences. Unfortunately, he continued, someone at this school has already violated that ancient, noble rule, and in doing so has harmed many innocent people and caused an irreversible disaster. That is the fundamental reason for the recent student petrifications you have all been wondering about. A ripple of shock ran through the hall. Students whispered and craned their necks, checking which seats were empty, glancing perilously at one another, as if the perpetrator might be sitting beside them. Snape stood motionless until the murmur died down, then spoke again. And the instigator, many of you have already heard his name. He paused, and when he spoke it, the name cut through the room like a blade. Albus Dumbledore. A new wave of noise rose up, incredulous and angry, but Snape raised his voice in time to push it back. I will explain. Hogwarts Castle is not entirely a lifeless building. It has a will of its own. It chooses its headmasters, seeks out magically gifted children, selects champions as in the Tri-Wizard tournament. There are many ways the castle exerts itself that you have not noticed. However, Snape's tone sharpened, that will has been deeply angered by Albus Dumbledore's recent actions. His voice, which had been measured, grew edged with contempt. The principal's duty is to protect students, maintain order, and create a safe haven for fledglings whose wings are not yet fully grown. Instead, Dumbledore committed an unforgivable wrong, worse even than the episode that once cost him his headmastership. He publicly, and from his position as headmaster, stirred up long-standing social tensions, seeking to detonate them. He attempted to turn a school that should be isolated and safe into a stage for his so-called grand designs, without any regard for how gravely his schemes would affect the students. Imagine a school dragged into the spotlight of society, riven by bloodline conflicts. What a terrifying future that would be. Snape paused, chest heaving, clutching his robes as if to steady himself against the anger. The students stood stunned, trying to digest his words. Even though Dumbledore is no longer headmaster, the will of Hogwarts has not forgiven him, Snape went on, his voice returning to its controlled cadence. Originally, Hogwarts was established to protect witches and wizards from Muggle hostility. Awakened and enraged by Dumbledore's folly, the castle's will has chosen to take drastic measures to fulfill that duty and compensate for his mistakes. It has begun to actively target Muggle-born students within the school. The conflict Dumbledore stirred up has predictably escalated into a war between Muggle-borns and wizarding families. To protect the wizarding community from perceived Muggle threats, the castle's will has decided to expel all Muggle-born students. The recent petrifications were warnings issued by the castle itself. This is also why that petrifying magic was so powerful. The power came from the castle. Snape's eyes swept the students' faces. To ensure the school's functioning and the safety of all students, including Muggle-borns, I, Severus Snape, headmaster of Hogwarts, must regretfully announce. He produced a parchment stamped with the headmaster's seal, placed it before him, and read aloud, the words carrying like a verdict. All Muggle-born students of Hogwarts are ordered to pack their belongings and leave the school during this Christmas holiday, and furthermore, not to return. Before he finished, a roar of disbelief and outrage burst through the great hall, an overwhelming wave of disbelief that swept the room like a physical force. 130. Book of admission? Are you insane? A student sprang to his feet, pointing at Snape and shouting, "You have no right to do this. Expel all Muggle-borns? What about the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy? What about the stability of the magical community? Don't think we don't see your underhanded schemes. You're just suppressing dissent while spouting nonsense about glory and duty. Despicable." More and more students rose to their feet. They weren't all Muggle-borns. Muggle-borns were actually in the minority. Half-bloods and even many pure-blood students stared at Snape with furious eyes. Their voices braided together into a single, surging wave of outrage. In that wave were Baron, Harry, Hermione, the red-haired Weasleys. There was Cedric, Shabby, Cho, Neville, and many others at every long table. The standing ones shouted, the seated ones added agreement with nods and looks. Severus Snape stood perfectly still, like a lighthouse in a storm or a leaf on a whirlpool, letting the students lash him with their passionate and crude words. There was not a ripple in his dark eyes. He was statue still, as if already dead. He remained motionless for nearly 10 minutes. When the students had finally exhausted themselves and the noise died down, the face that had seemed incapable of expression spoke again. Of course, taking the international statute of wizarding secrecy and the stability of the magical community into account, we will not simply abandon thousands of wizards living in Muggle society and thereby increase chaos and hidden danger. The Board of Governors and the Ministry of Magic would not permit such an extreme policy. His face was as rigid as ever, his tone flat, as if the tirade had affected him not at all. We will resolve the matter as quickly as possible to guarantee Muggle-born students' right to education, but it is regrettable that Hogwarts now is no longer a suitable place for you to live. The students who had just caught their breath were about to explode again, but Snape cut them off with a single act. He took a massive book from his robe. It was an unremarkable, even crude, large volume. The cover, probably black dragonhide, had begun to flake, revealing pale yellow patches beneath. There were no decorations, not even a title. Still, the instant he revealed the book, every eye in the Great Hall snapped to it. Many older students widened their eyes, suspicion already forming. Besides petrifying those Muggle-born students, the Chamber's will has made another regrettable move. Snape held the old black book up for all to see. The Book of Admission. It no longer records the names of Muggle-born wizards. The murmur that had been rising vanished instantly. In the heavy silence, Snape's words hung in the air like a chill. This means that even if we were willing to force Muggle-born wizards to enroll, it could only last for 10 years at most. After 10 years, the Book of Admission will no longer provide any list of wizards born to Muggles. Whether it's that terrifying petrification or this Book of Admission, both have clearly shown that Hogwarts, the school itself, is resisting Muggle-born wizards, and as a member of this school, I cannot defy its will. He scanned the Great Hall, which had become like a graveyard, and his mechanical voice filled the silence. I admit this is not good for anyone, but the fact has already come to pass. Albus Dumbledore's folly has borne bitter fruit that everyone must bear together. We must pay extra costs to restore stability to the school and to society. For example, he said, raising his hand and pointing to several grim-faced wizards nearby, the gentlemen of the Board of Governors have decided to raise funds to establish a brand new school for Muggle-born students. And the important task of finding wizards in Muggle society will have to be entrusted to the Ministry of Magic for the time being. After all, creating another Book of Admission is simply too difficult. Related matters will be put on the agenda this Christmas, and completion will likely take several years. During this difficult period, I hope Muggle-born students will strictly adhere to the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy and not put further pressure on an already precarious magical society. Of course, your names will remain on the student register, and you will not be directly expelled. I know some of you will not obey the school's wishes and will return to Hogwarts after Christmas. For those students, I can only say, I cannot guarantee your safety. He paused, and the silence that followed felt like ice. The corners of his mouth lifted as if forcing a smile, but the stiffness in his face made the expression look odd. Although Professor Sprout has discovered that newly matured mandrake can effectively treat the petrification caused by the Chamber's attacks, the mandrakes in the school still need half a year to mature, which means if you truly intend to return at your own risk, be prepared to not open your eyes until summer break. That's better than nothing. Someone muttered to themselves, and in the hush, everyone heard it clearly. If we can't study, can't cast spells, what's the difference between lying at home and lying in the hospital? Exactly, came the immediate answer, and another voice joined in. I will not have my rights trampled by some inexplicable Chamber's will. If it can drive out Muggleborns today, it can drive out half-bloods tomorrow. If it can drive us out today, It can capture us tomorrow and turn us into house elves. It's only petrification, right? If this castle has the courage, let it take my life. If it really is the castle itself that wants to expel Muggleborns, then I won't stay in this rotten school either. No one is safe in such an absurd place. Yes, no, why should we leave? We should unite and eradicate that tyrannical will and make Hogwarts the home we know again. What chamber will? I think it's just those pure-blood lunatics putting on a show. The students' angry voices rose again, countless different tones, but one shared emotion. Gryffindors gathered courage, ready to fight injustice to the end. Hufflepuffs discussed safe places that could shelter the persecuted. Ravenclaws examined whether everything Snape had said was true, and the few Slytherins quietly considered how the Board of Governors and the Ministry might be involved, or how to rid the school of that tyrannical will once and for all. Snape remained motionless on the headmaster's dais. Hidden beneath his black hair, the corners of his mouth curved into an expression no one could see. 131. Strange Professors. The hastily called meeting had no food or desserts, only one piece of bad news after another, and, not surprisingly, it failed to keep people there. After Snape dismissed the meeting, everyone left as quickly as possible, unwilling to stay within his sight for even a second. Only a few lingered, frozen and trying to digest what they had heard. Avada was one of them. Cedric had patted his shoulder a moment ago, but Avada only waved him off, signaling he needed more time to think. There was no doubt, the Book of Admittance was a fake. What Snape had produced was nothing more than an ordinary parchment book, aged and stained by clever forgery so skillfully done that the flaws were nearly invisible. Despite that, the stubborn pureblood faction's scheme had worked brilliantly. They had managed to shift responsibility onto the vanished Dumbledore, and the supposed will of the chamber used the authority of the forged book's justification for their actions, and even involved the Minister for Magic. The result: most students were stunned into believing that those who wanted to drive out Muggleborns were an irresistible force, backed by an authority that seemed absolute. How had they pulled off such an outrageous plan? Compared to the original attacks, isolated incidents and threats about the Chamber of Secrets meant to frighten people, this was on another level entirely. They hadn't just scared people, they had demolished Dumbledore's reputation, openly moved to expel all Muggleborns, and established a supreme authority to be used when needed. Avada could already picture their next moves. Drag the crisis out for 5 or 6 years, until those Muggle-born children missed their chance to attend Hogwarts and reached an age where they entered the magical world completely unqualified, becoming a permanently marginalized class. Then open a separate, inferior school for Muggle-borns to provide substandard education while subtly teaching pure-blood supremacy. Over time, that disparity would reshape the attitudes of the entire British magical community, making Muggle-borns seem inherently inferior. Once public opinion was altered, they could pass laws restricting Muggle-born rights, and whether those people would eventually become outright slaves would depend entirely on the mercy of the pure-blood masters. There was, however, one obvious obstacle: Albus Dumbledore. He would never allow such a future to happen. Dumbledore had immense personal power and numerous trump cards. In effect, he could, like Voldemort, single-handedly assemble a force capable of opposing the entire British magical establishment. How did they plan to deal with Dumbledore? They couldn't reasonably expect him to sit back and obey quietly. Did they aim to wrest Voldemort's soul back from Dumbledore? Was some theft of a blood pact involved? They still had a Horcrux diary for resurrection, but experience showed that reviving a fragment of a Horcrux produced at best a diminished combatant, nothing to match Dumbledore. Beyond these practical questions, one thing puzzled Avada most: the professor's reactions. When Snape used his arguments to frighten the students, the younger and more peripheral teachers, those from astronomy, Muggle studies, arithmancy, looked shocked and unsettled. But the key veterans, McGonagall, Flitwick, Sprout, and even Kettleburn, though they tried to adopt gloomy faces, paled and chewed their lips in the way of people outwardly distressed, their minds were astonishingly calm. Why? Could all of this be part of Dumbledore's plan? If so, What plan could remain now that the foundation seemed almost torn apart? Even if Snape were secretly on Dumbledore's side, he had already made an unbreakable vow and would have to pay with his life to betray the conspirators. Could the old professors simply watch that happen without a tremor? The inconsistency bothered Avada, but it also reassured him. Those veterans would not betray Dumbledore, nor would they give up. Their serenity suggested they understood Dumbledore's situation far better than Avada did, and that Dumbledore probably still had an ultimate move that could turn everything around. He forced himself to think practically. Rest for a few days, regain his strength, then continue decrypting the Chamber of Secrets. If they could break open the chamber's entrance and Professor McGonagall and the others led a party to kill the basilisk, the rumors about a chamber will and the rest of the conspiracy would collapse. Even if someone kept changing the passwords, once he had initially analyzed the soul and learned the rules behind the chamber's entrance, its soul magic, deciphering new passwords would be easy. And with Dumbledore on their side, victory would be theirs. He pounded his chest in determination, stood up, and stopped paying attention to Snape, the governors, and Fudge as they clustered and whispered. He hurried back to the Hufflepuff common room. As he had expected, the common room lay under a silence he had never seen before. Even the warm fire couldn't shake it. Many students sat staring blankly at nothing: the fireplace, chairs, the round window, the plants on the walls, even the wands in their hands. Most of them were Muggle-borns, and they believed they were about to be expelled. 132. Hogwarts is more than a castle. I know everyone isn't in a good mood, but children, I still advise you to cheer up and carry on with your lessons. Professor Snape's speech had come 3 days before the Christmas holiday, which meant that, after the shocking news, the students still had to get through 2 more days of classes before the dreadfully uncertain holiday arrived. Fear spread through the school faster than anyone remembered. Hogwarts felt to the students like a man-eating beast, especially to the Muggle-borns. The once busy corridors were now full of heavy, hurried footsteps. No one wanted to linger for even a second, afraid the chamber might strike at any moment. At least for now, there had been no cases of petrification in classrooms or common rooms. At first, a few Slytherins loudly taunted the Muggle-born students in the corridors, but after being cornered in the Slytherin common room by a group of red-eyed students for half a day, no one dared prod the tiger at such a critical moment. Regardless of what the future holds, at least the knowledge you gain will not vanish from your minds. You are part of the magical community, and what will ultimately help you find happiness are the wands in your hands and the minds in your heads, not some piece of parchment. In the Transfiguration classroom, Professor McGonagall paused with her chalk mid-stroke and looked over a room of dispirited, restless students. "But Professor, what's the use?" came a voice. Gryffindors always felt free to challenge their teachers, even their head of house. "We're about to be driven out, aren't we? We won't be able to study or even practice spells at home. So what good is this knowledge now?" McGonagall glanced at the speaker, a Muggle-born Gryffindor boy, biting his lower lip, his face taut as he tried to hide the tremble in his voice and the redness in his eyes. She walked over, bent down, and put on an exaggerated look of surprise, raising her voice so the whole class could hear. "Are you really going to give up just like that? Just because of some vague entity that might target you, are you going to give up knowledge, your friends, magic, and Quidditch and obediently go home? Oh, Merlin above, if you were usually this obedient, our House Point's hourglass would be overflowing." A few reluctant laughs broke the oppressive silence at last. "We professors haven't given up yet." McGonagall returned to the podium, her tone calm and firm. "Petrification has only happened in the corridors, hasn't it? Then we'll move our lessons to the common rooms. Aren't our common rooms in towers? Everyone can take a broom, and I'll give you permission to fly out the windows every day. If people in the common rooms and dormitories can be petrified, then we'll go outside. And if this so-called will keeps attacking, then we'll simply abandon this old castle and find somewhere else to hold classes." A building is the least important part of a school, however old or mysterious it may be. The real Hogwarts is not the castle. It's you, it's us professors, It's the house elves bustling in the kitchens. It's the traditions and spirit passed down for 1,000 years. And those things have one thing in common. They must not be controlled by a vague, malevolent will. I will not give up on any of you unless you choose to give up on yourselves. Look. In the greenhouses, Professor Sprout, her robe patched in several places, showed the class a broad bed of small green plants. These are mandrake seedlings. We're just about to study them, so we'll start a little early. Who can tell me, what are the properties of a mandrake? The root of a mandrake is a powerful restorative, effective in reversing transfigurations and other spells and curses, answered a student in a low voice. Very good. Sprout smiled encouragingly. Mandrake is an important ingredient in most antidotes, but it is also very dangerous. Who can tell me why? Hearing a mandrake's cry can be fatal. Absolutely correct. She held up a potted seedling so everyone could see. See? It's an ordinary little herb like this, about 3 sickles a plant on the market, yet it can both remove curses and easily kill the careless. Compared to it, that thing that petrifies students is hardly worth mentioning. In terms of lethality, a mandrake's cry is far worse than that curse, and the petrification itself can be reversed with potions made from mandrake. The class fell silent at that. According to Professor Sprout, the terrifying chamber wasn't even as fearsome as a 3-sickle herb. The magical world is like this, marvelous and dangerous, full of things more wondrous and deadlier than mandrake, and we live among them. It's in such an environment, facing countless dangerous plants and creatures, that wizards learn to study nature, to explore, to use wand and mind to carve out a safe place for themselves. Over time, magic conquered many strange and deadly things. And now someone claims that a petrification curse in a castle can deprive all Muggle-born young wizards in Britain of their ability to learn and grow. Do you believe that? She watched the dullness lift from their faces until their eyes had a spark again. It's not worthy. Look, it's that simple to give a lifeless object a kind of consciousness. An animated suit of armor clanked among the Ravenclaw students. Its visor opened and closed like a mouth as it performed a droll routine that made even the disheartened laugh. Professor Flitwick waved his wand, making the armor act out various antics. See? As the creator of that will, I have absolute control over it, and if I want it to stop, he flicked his wand gracefully, and the armor froze, turning back into an inert object. It's that easy. That so-called chamber will is essentially like that. A mind created by wizards. It should serve the wizards within it. It has no right to take away a person's right to learn, much less to harm others. If it does, then it has malfunctioned. It should be shut down and repaired. Professor Snape sat alone in his office, the Slytherin common room empty for the moment. After all, anyone who made it into Slytherin was at least a half-blood. He had less worry about being targeted by the basilisk. A sharp knock sounded at the door. Professor Snape, may I come in? I have something very important to tell you. You speak French? In the Hufflepuff common room, Avada, Shabby, and Stebbins stared at their roommate, Henry Summers, surprised. They didn't have classes right now. Avada, who was resting, had no plans to go to the library or the Chamber of Secrets entrance to study, so he was just chatting with his roommates. Yes, Summers said. My grandmother was French. She taught me from a young age. It's been 3 years and you never showed it off? What is there to show off? There aren't any French books in the library, and no foreign guests from Beauxbatons come to visit. But everyday language and magical terminology are different. Are you sure you could keep up at Beauxbatons? That I don't know, Summers admitted, but I imagine there will still be plenty of Muggleborns like me applying to other schools. They ought to be looked after, right? That's not necessarily true. Avada shook his head, dampening their hopes. The only Muggleborns who can really leave are the 100 or so still studying at Hogwarts. Those who've already graduated and have families will find it difficult to uproot themselves, and children under 11 don't even know the magical world exists. By the time admission letters from that new school arrive, they'll be too thrilled to think about the risks ahead. Muggleborns are already few, and they have no foundation inside the magical community. Without help, they're easy to manipulate, and some pureblood families have even produced the Chamber's will and the Book of Admittance. documents that will intimidate anyone hoping to act in secret. The common room fell quiet. By the way, Ken, you're Muggle-born too, right? Shabby asked, maybe to lighten the mood. Any plans for the future? Kill the basilisk and then follow Dumbledore to confront the pureblood faction? Avada had no such grand plan. My situation's complicated. I have to stay in the orphanage until I come of age, so going off to Ilvermorny in America would be difficult. I'll probably find a small potion or alchemy workshop, work there, and learn slowly. He shrugged, changing his position. If things get so bad that Muggleborns can't survive here, I'll lie low in Britain and try to help guide and protect any new Muggleborns I can. That's about all I can do. When I graduate from Beauxbatons, I'll help you, Summers joked, then laughed. We'll set up a quick escape route from Britain to France. It shouldn't come to that, Avada said. Dumbledore's still here. He won't just let things get that far. Maybe tomorrow he'll come back with evidence, prove the Board of Governors and the Ministry wrong, and be headmaster again. Right. The mention of Dumbledore restored some of the Hufflepuff's confidence. Not everyone believed the Board or Snape. Dumbledore's reputation wasn't so easily wiped away. Especially in Hufflepuff, where many Muggleborns lived, the hope that Dumbledore would return and overturn the Board's lies, or somehow restrain the Chamber's will, was strong. But I'm staying at Hogwarts for now, Avada said with a small smile. At least until I've actually been petrified once before I consider leaving. I'm not leaving easily either. Summers nodded seriously. Still, I should go home for Christmas to prepare and tell my parents what's happening. Look! An exclamation cut off their conversation and drew every eye to the bulletin board. A huge new parchment had appeared, taking up almost a third of the space. Its title was stark and unmistakable: Hufflepuff House Muggle-born Student List. To prevent students with special family circumstances from having their bloodline disputed, all Muggle-born students are hereby specially organized and archived using the Book of Admittance and Hogwarts student files. They will be publicly displayed by house on each house's bulletin board. Students named on the list are asked to decide whether they will continue to remain at school after the Christmas holiday. If they choose to stay, the school cannot guarantee their personal safety. The list ran through the years, 7th, 6th, 5th, and contained about 40 to 50 names, neatly arranged by year and alphabetized. Every name was a Muggle-born student, and each person would now have to choose between leaving school and facing the danger posed by the Chamber's will. Third year. Wait, where am I? Avada said, stunned. He scanned the Hufflepuff third-year list again, and found that his name was not on it. So you're not Muggle-born after all? Summers gaped at him and slapped him on the shoulder. Looks like they left you off by mistake. Nothing to worry about. Congratulations! Shabby and Stebbins came over, grinning. Seems at least one of your parents must be a wizard, and they left you in the Muggle orphanage for some reason. Now you don't have to leave Hogwarts. How does it feel, the ups and downs? Avada frowned and ignored his roommate's excitement. He was certain he was Muggle-born. There were two reasons he was convinced. First, the Department of Mystery's records from the time of the experiment explicitly identified him as a Muggle orphan, which was why he'd been chosen for that work. Second, besides studying mental power, he had researched human vitality. Professor Baker's hypotheses suggested subtle differences in vitality between those with wizarding ancestry and those who were Muggle-born. Every Muggle-born wizard opens a new magical bloodline. Their children, even if both parents were Muggle-born, still show the vitality characteristics of wizarding descendants and are regarded as half-bloods. Avada himself showed no such characteristics. Dumbledore had never discussed his ancestry with him. Logically, if Hogwarts's hive-blood records contradicted the Department of Mysteries, Dumbledore would have told him. So why wasn't his name on the Muggle-born list? A possibility flashed through his mind, and he bolted upright. I'm going out. He rushed for the common room door, startling his roommates. Where are you going? To find Snape. He had to confirm something with Snape. If Snape could verify the records, Avada might finally know who was pulling the strings behind the whole thing. Chapter 134, The Binding Power of the Vow. Knock, knock, knock. Professor Snape, may I come in? Snape, idly rocking in his chair, frowned, turned his head toward the office door and pushed the hair out of his eyes. "Come in." He waved a hand and lifted the enchantment on the door. The man who entered was someone very much in the habit of stirring trouble, the kindred spirit of whatever plot Dumbledore had once relied on. "Mr. Ken?" Snape asked, glancing at him. Ken, Avada, hesitated, then looked at Snape's forearm in expression with a careful, almost measuring gaze. When he saw nothing unusual, he began in a low voice. "Professor, I saw the list of Muggle-born students that was just released. My name isn't on it." "Isn't that splendid?" Snape raised an eyebrow and croaked in that half-lazy, half-spiteful tone. Someone who always thought himself Muggle-born suddenly discovers he has wizard blood. No attacks from the chamber, a fresh start, a light at the end of the tunnel. Or are you looking forward to being petrified again, or leaving Hogwarts? He added with sharper amusement. "Neither, Professor." Avada's face fell into a small, offended pout. Snape's manner was just as irritating as ever. "I remember my file. My record said I was Muggle-born. The Department of Mysteries confirmed it." "Do you really want to be petrified?" Snape snapped, irritation edging his voice. The Board of Governors had student bloodlines re-examined to avoid mistakes. If someone's ancestors were squibs, descended from wizards but lacking magical ability, the board might reclassify them as wizard descendants. You appearing as a wizard descendant could be nothing more than a clerical reclassification. "Have I made myself clear, Mr. Ken?" Avada breathed out slowly. He had expected this answer. The board reclassifying squib descendants as having wizard blood made a sort of bureaucratic sense, but it didn't fit what he knew about his family. Squib ancestry couldn't account for his sudden removal from the Muggle-born list. There had to be another reason, and crucially, there was someone on the board who seemed to insist that a student named Ken was in fact a wizard descendant. Someone who believed that his listed Muggle-born status was a cover and that he was descended from a very important family. Lucius Malfoy. Avada had watched closely ever since the fainting incidents began, and up through Snape's official announcement about expelling Muggle-borns. Despite the chaos at Hogwarts, Lucius, although a governor, had never once set foot on the grounds while other governors were arriving. At first, Avada had assumed Lucius was keeping his distance because of the diary trouble. Now he realized Lucius might have been manipulating things from afar. Before Dumbledore's dismissal, the board had no access to student files, and those files were kept under extremely tight security. They couldn't be removed or tampered with lightly. The only way Lucius's influence could change a student's classification without ever showing his face at the school was if he had another line of control, perhaps through the diary he once entrusted to the school. It was absurd, and yet the pieces fit. Lucius had access to and used the diary. He had motive and influence. Governors such as Flint and Parkinson may have been the public faces while he worked behind the scenes. Snape's earlier actions, his odd behavior back then, had, in retrospect, helped Avada confirm the identity of the mastermind more than a year later. He guessed he was 70 to 80% certain that the initial fainting incident that led to Dumbledore's removal was orchestrated, at least in part, by Lucius Malfoy. Avada lowered his voice and scanned the room with his magic to make sure there were no hidden ears. Satisfied, he fixed Snape with a steady look and asked, softer this time, "Professor, do you happen to have the former headmaster's contact information?" Snape's pupils narrowed. "What?" he said then, as if remembering, added, "I just recalled. He borrowed something quite valuable from me before he was dismissed. He never returned it, and I haven't been able to reach him since." "Found anything?" Snape asked abruptly, snapping back to the matter on hand when he noticed Ken's strange, furtive gestures. Avada blinked. "Found what?" "I only wanted to send a message to the former headmaster so he can return that item, nothing more." As he spoke, he rolled up his sleeve, exposing his forearm slowly, an unmistakable hint. Snape's expression changed. He drew a crimson quill from his robe and set it on the desk. "Tell me the clues you've uncovered, Mr. Ken," he said, voice low. "I'll relay them to Dumbledore." Avada felt a flicker of puzzlement. What exactly was in Snape's unbreakable vow that allowed him to promise to pass information to Dumbledore so openly? If it weren't for Dumbledore's guarantee, combined with his own understanding of Snape and Snape's frank, controlled mind, He might have suspected a clause in the vow that somehow permitted this. He hid a sigh at how secretive the unbreakable vow was. If only he could see its terms, he could study them. For now, he kept his doubt to himself and finally spoke, calm and direct. I suspect the manipulator behind the whole affair is Lucius Malfoy. Avada, still uneasy, cast a silencing charm over himself and Snape, then quickly and quietly explained how Lucius Malfoy might believe himself descended from a famous wizard, how he might have possessed the black diary Avada had first mentioned in the prophecy, and how that diary was the real culprit controlling the basilisk to attack students. When he finished, Snape frowned, staring at the floor. His fingers kept rubbing the quill, probably made from Fawkes's feathers, and he remained silent for a long time. "Professor?" Avada prompted after nearly 3 minutes, waving his hand in front of Snape's face to bring him back. Snape drew a slow breath and nodded. "I understand, Mr. Ken. The information you've given is very important." He straightened, sat properly behind the desk, and pulled a sheet of parchment from a drawer. With the phoenix feather quill, he began to write. "This quill is made from Fawkes's feathers," he said as he wrote. "Anything written with it will be received by Dumbledore simultaneously." Avada had guessed as much when he noticed the dark mark-like magic in the quill. Seeing Snape didn't intend to dismiss him immediately, he bent forward to read over the professor's shoulder. Snape's handwriting, in a dark golden script, was concise and direct. "Ken believes one of the culprits behind the attacks is likely Lucius Malfoy, who mistakenly thought Ken was descended from a famous wizard. The Black Diary can control the basilisk using Parseltongue. It is the main cause of the basilisk attacks and is currently in the possession of a student within the school." Snape finished rapidly. "That will do." He snapped his fingers and the parchment, covered in the golden writing, burst into ash. "When I spoke with the Board of Governors," Snape said, "they mentioned a very mysterious person. They claimed this person provided key information that allowed the plan to reach its current stage. The other board members know only his name. They cannot contact him and do not know where he is. Do you have any idea who that might be?" Avada frowned. Who could that be? Lucius might be the diary's owner, but he didn't have any special access beyond believing himself to be a descendant. Who else could have fed the board crucial information? The professors around Dumbledore seemed unlikely, and Lockhart certainly hadn't acted strangely. He didn't have the Horcrux diary, and he had neither motive nor means to aid Voldemort. Peter Pettigrew was under Avada's constant watch. He'd stuck close to Ron and wouldn't have been reachable. "Sorry, I don't," Avada admitted after a long pause. "I can't think of anyone." Snape looked disappointed for a moment, then immediately hardened his expression. "Thank you for the information, Mr. Ken, but do not take part in what comes next." He leaned in, fixing Avada with a steady look, and spoke slowly, every word deliberate. "The Black Diary you described is very likely Lord Voldemort himself. You once saw him splitting his soul, didn't you? According to Dumbledore's research, he has split his soul multiple times. Each fragment is, in effect, a smaller Lord Voldemort. That is how a mere diary can control a basilisk with Parseltongue." The words hit Avada like a cold wave. Dumbledore had discovered the secret of Horcruxes. His heart sank. He was grateful he had already retrieved the Resurrection Stone. Otherwise, thinking of Dumbledore's safety would be unbearable. "Don't underestimate Lord Voldemort just because you faced him before," Snape warned. "Look at his methods this time. Fainting students, basilisk attacks, and then shifting the blame to the idea of the chamber acting of its own will. He's far more vicious than last year's Voldemort, and one of his fragments is hiding among the students." "I understand, Professor. I'll be careful." Avada nodded. He had no intention of attacking the diary directly. His plan was to find and open the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets, let the professors kill the basilisk, and reveal the truth so Hogwarts could return to normal. Snape's reply was blunt. "It's not a matter of carefulness. I suggest you leave Hogwarts now and only return when everything is completely over." Avada bristled inwardly. Snape was not wrong about personal safety. He was a Muggle born on the basilisk's hit list, and as the student who had defeated Voldemort, he was an even bigger target. But he couldn't simply leave with the chamber entrance still sealed. Without solving that, The diary would always have a fallback, and the situation would never be resolved. Leaving would create a deadlock. Dumbledore might be able to work on the soul magic side of things, but Avada couldn't rely on that alone. After a long silence, he forced out, "I'll consider it, Professor." Snape snorted. "Humph, suit yourself. You know how to deal with a basilisk, but don't think the old tricks will still work. The rooster crowing trick won't help now. That basilisk's hearing has been taken care of. If you insist on staying, you'll have to move through the castle with your eyes closed." Avada opened his mouth to argue, but Snape waved him toward the door. "You've been here long enough. Staying will only arouse suspicion. I don't like keeping students from other houses in my office for too long." He ushered Avada out without another word, the door closing behind them. 136. Baron in confinement. The provider of key information. What key information? As Avada walked back toward the Hufflepuff common room, he replayed Professor Snape's words in his head. Snape's office was only a few steps away from the common room. Avada had to think fast. What information could possibly have been critical enough to push the whole plan this far? The fainting incidents were self-inflicted and could be staged anywhere with the help of inside accomplices. As for the basilisk and the Chamber of Secrets, Tom Riddle had known about them from the start. He didn't need anyone to tell him. But thinking it over, wasn't Dumbledore's role strangely passive throughout the whole affair? He forced himself back to the point. What information could be called key? Of course, Myrtle's memory and the chamber password had been altered at the very beginning of the school year. Avada shivered so hard he nearly twisted his ankle. They had known someone would investigate the chamber from the start, and one of the reasons they staged the fainting episodes to take Dumbledore out was to get him away and clear out the portrait guardians. Who told them? He rubbed his temples, wishing he could strip every moment of his life open and examine it for a leak. But there was nothing. Before term had even begun, he'd never told anyone he knew about the Chamber of Secrets. At most, he'd muttered some vague worries on the train. At the end of his second year, he had gone to the abandoned lavatory, but he had seen nothing then. He couldn't even see souls at the time. When he'd hidden in the spatial interlayer, he'd checked carefully and confirmed there was no one else nearby. Could someone have legilimentsed him? The thought was absurd, and he dismissed it at once. With his occlumency and alert magical senses, someone could possibly force their way through, but no one could read his thoughts without him noticing, not even Dumbledore. So how had they known? Who could have supplied such precise information? Did the other side have a seer or another transmigrator? He let his mind wander as he walked slowly toward the common room, still only halfway there. "Yo, Ken?" A familiar voice behind him made him turn. "Baron? Just finished with Professor Snape?" Baron asked, holding a bottle of water and a mop, wearing an apron and smiling as he greeted Avada. The sight of him in that outfit struck Avada dumb for a moment. "Were you given detention?" he asked cautiously. "Yes. What happened?" Baron, always a model student, had actually been caught and given detention. Avada found the idea as unlikely as someone having known at the start he would investigate the chamber. "I was caught trespassing in the Forbidden Forest," Baron said casually, wiping the floor with the mop handle. "It was worth it, though. I had a big haul, and I could use your help. Meet me by the Room of Requirement entrance after dinner. I'll show you something good." "Preferably not the Room of Requirement," Avada said. Baron paused. "Harry and the others have been using it for potions lately. It's not exactly secret, though. An empty classroom will do. How about the potions classroom?" "Okay." Baron looked pleased to keep the suspense. Avada wanted to press him, but curiosity about Snape's mysterious source nagged at him, so he watched Baron walk away and tried to think through the problem again. The more he thought, the worse he felt. Why was a Horcrux left by Lord Voldemort causing more trouble than Voldemort himself? He sighed. "I hid and schemed against him once. Now it's his turn to hide and scheme against me. Karma, I suppose." He walked until he reached the entrance to the Hufflepuff common room. From a distance, he saw students bustling back and forth between the kitchen and common room, carrying jars and baskets. Everything looked alive with activity. "Ken!" Rolf Scamander was carrying a heap of snacks into the common room and waved him over. Biscuits? Sweets? Chocolate? What's going on? Avada asked, puzzled, unwrapping a chocolate frog from the bundle he'd been carrying. He'd left earlier when the common room had been under the petrification curse's shadow. How had it become so lively so quickly? Susan just tapped a barrel of balsamic vinegar, Rolf said, glowing. We're having a feast tonight for that barrel. We're getting everything ready. Want some more? A feast? Avada blinked at the word balsamic vinegar but let it pass. Rolf explained, excited. This feast is for the Muggle-born students. Balsamic vinegar is just the thing to wash away a bad mood. Rolf smiled. Our head of house made it clear we aren't giving up on anyone. There are a lot of ways to deal with petrification now. The professors will come to the common room to teach cures. We can even fly out the windows on broomsticks. And the head of house's mandrake is growing. If none of that works, we'll leave the castle together. The professors and students will move as one. We want to use the balsamic vinegar to lift spirits and encourage the Muggle-borns so they don't give up on magic, on school life, or on the food in the kitchens. Good food brings good cheer, right? Sounds good. Anything I can help with? Avada raised an eyebrow. The professor's words sounded inspiring, but their stance still seemed to assume they were fighting the chamber as a political construct. Could they really not know about the basilisk itself and be parroting Snape and the Board of Governors? No, it's almost ready, Rolf said, then stopped as if remembering something. Oh, by the way, Ken, you're Muggle-born, right? I heard your name isn't on the school's Muggle-born list. I asked Professor Snape. He said the school rechecked student files and found I might be a squib descendant, something with thin wizarding blood, so they put me down as a wizard descendant. That can happen? Congratulations. There's nothing to congratulate. Things will sort themselves out sooner or later. Avada watched Rolf disappear with his snacks, then unwrapped his chocolate frog and drew the trading card from inside. Herpo the Fowl. Avada's eye twitched. Thank you, he muttered. 137. Spider warning device. At night, the Hufflepuff common room had been expanded to several times its usual size. Tables were set neatly across the room and loaded with a dazzling spread of food. Students, many still in casual clothes or pajamas, wandered between the long tables to help themselves or sat in small clusters chatting. A number of them still looked anxious, only picking at their plates, appetite gone. But the lively atmosphere and friends befriend. Encouragement gradually brought color back to their faces. Laughter and conversation returned, faint at first and then growing steadier. How enviable, someone murmured. In a quiet corner, the Baron sat on a high stool with a suitcase at his feet. He held a cup of lemon tea and sipped slowly, then sighed to Avada next to him. The Slytherin common room's been empty lately. It'd fit a library in there. Why's that? Avada asked, puzzled. Surely the Slytherins, being the safest from whatever the chamber was doing, would be the most at ease right now. Baron shrugged. Most of the students who shout about blood purity have been patrolling the corridors lately, showing off their pure blood status for all to see. I ran into a few on my way. Very arrogant. He sighed. There are a lot of those people in Slytherin. If my grades weren't good and I hadn't earned points for the house, I'd probably be a target too. The rest are just unhappy with the situation, so they're not in the mood to relax. Never mind. Forget I said it. Let me show you what I've been working on. Baron rose, picked up the suitcase, and moved to a slightly more secluded spot. Not the sort of thing to parade in front of students who are trying to enjoy the banquet. Avada followed with his plate and peered curiously at the suitcase. He could tell something living was inside, an ordinary animal, not a magical construct. Did Baron find some strange creature in the Forbidden Forest? If so, what made it special? Are you still the students who were petrified by a basilisk and not by the chamber's will? Avada asked. Of course, Baron said. Avada nodded. After Professor Snape had confirmed it himself, he had no reason to doubt. Good. Baron's grin widened with something like triumph. After you told me about the basilisk, I went to the library and read up as much as I could. Professor Kettleburn slipped me a note to check the restricted section, and I even wrote home for a few of their collected books on dangerous creatures. He tapped the suitcase. And I found an odd detail. There's one kind of animal, not even a magical species, that's terrified of the basilisk. They've even evolved the ability to sense one. When they detect a basilisk nearby, they'll try to flee desperately. Spiders! Avada blurted, nearly shouting. He'd seen where Baron was going and wished he'd thought of it himself. Of course, spiders. Baron's smile deepened, pleased to have found a kindred mind. Exactly, spiders. If we use that, we could make an early warning system for the basilisk, Avada said, excitement growing. Give a spider to every Muggle-born student and tell them to close their eyes and run the moment their spider starts acting strange. You're a genius, Baron said, genuinely impressed. This could save a lot of lives. Avada's admiration for Baron swelled. Baron had not only understood the basilisk's traits, he'd dug into obscure sources, gotten access to restricted material, and even consulted family books. He'd found a crucial detail that Avada, even with his previous knowledge, had overlooked. The basilisk can block its ears against a rooster's crow and avoid being seen with a blindfold, but it can't fool spiders' perception. Unless the Board of Governors and the Diary somehow wiped out every spider in Hogwarts and the Forbidden Forest, something that would make Ron ecstatic, this weakness would remain. Baron's face grew more serious. When Snape said it was the chamber petrifying people, I wasn't entirely convinced at first. The rooster didn't work after all. Then a classmate who kept a pet spider mentioned it'd been ill lately, and I remembered that strange note. I checked and found lots of others' pet spiders had similar problems. That pointed to the basilisk. You went into the Forbidden Forest, Avada said. To catch spiders, Baron replied casually. Avada's eyes widened. You went into an acromantula nest alone? Baron waved it off. I'm not that reckless. I stayed on the edge and caught a few small solitary acromantulas. Spiders are weirdly common until you need one, then they're impossible to find. I remembered the acromantula colony we found in first year and thought I might get some there. I've been carrying a few with me these past days to test for the basilisk. I also rescued some half-dead spiders and had to go back to replenish my stock, which is how I got caught. Then why didn't you tell whoever caught you that you were trying to save the school? Avada pressed. Because I still don't have all the answers, Baron said, his expression sobering. There's a problem. The acromantulas I catch always resist and try to escape at every chance. I can't tell whether they're freaking out because they sense a basilisk or because they want to get away from me. Compared to a basilisk, I look like a much bigger threat to them. He rubbed his brow. I've been trying to solve that for days, and I haven't had any success. Chapter 138, Possibility of an Early Breakthrough. Baron opened the suitcase he had kept by his feet. Let me show you a device I made myself. Don't worry, it's just ordinary spiders inside, not acromantulas. Inside was a glass jar the size of a quaffle. A small, black, ordinary spider lay weakly at the bottom, a pile of tiny insects beside it. Probably its food. To keep the spider calm under normal conditions, I smeared some mimosa sap on the inside of the lid. That's the main ingredient of the cheering charm. It helps stabilize their temperaments. Baron set the jar on the table as he explained. Nothing else yet? Not for now. This could be a lifeline for Muggle-born students for a long time to come, Avada said, considering the device. It could also be the key to exposing the Board of Governors' conspiracy. Faced with something so important, he concentrated. By standard practice, he would have taken a sip of wit-sharpening potion, but he was still recovering and couldn't. He set down his knife and fork, drew his wand, and pointed it at the spider. He closed his eyes, furrowed his brow, and carefully probed the spider's mind and life force. After a long moment, he looked back up at Baron. For this species, its ability to sense a basilisk is a little strong, about a 50-meter radius. If the basilisk is active, that range will increase. That would cover most of the castle, which isn't very useful for an individual device. Avada tapped the glass with his wand. I suggest adding an enchantment to the jar to limit its mental range, bring the sensing radius down to 20 or 30 meters. And we should limit the spider's other stress behaviors and add shock resistance, Baron added. Oh, and students carrying this won't always be watching the spider closely. We need an enchantment to monitor its state and sound an alarm if it panics. And it has to be as portable and inconspicuous as possible. This jar is a bit too big now, but we still need to leave enough living space for the spider. The size issue could be solved by picking the right species. Very useful suggestions. Baron had a notepad and pen and was jotting down Avada's ideas. But if we add all that, won't making a single device be pretty difficult? We need one for every Muggle-born student. Not necessarily. Avada shook his head. Give me half an hour, and I can develop the auxiliary enchantments. The casting difficulty should be manageable at a 3rd or 4th year level. If we get a few people to help make them, we can produce enough. That fast? Baron looked surprised. Isn't your mental strength still recovering? Don't use wit sharpening potion or anything. Developing small enchantments doesn't require wit sharpening potion. Avada smiled and began to lay out a plan. For spider selection, consult Professor Kettleburn or Hagrid for recommendations, then contact a supplier in Diagon Alley for bulk purchase. At this pace, one Christmas holiday should be enough to make all the devices needed for the Muggle-born students at school. He finished the rest of his meal in a few bites and stood. No time to lose. I'll start developing the spells now. I'll borrow this jar for a bit. Okay. Baron immediately lost his appetite when the matter was raised. I'll go find Professor Kettleburn about the spiders. Good. Avada nodded. We need to be quick. Try to make all the devices for the Muggle-born students staying at school before Christmas. Everyone we can save matters. Right now, the basilisk's eyes have that transparent layer like goggles, so its gaze petrifies rather than kills. But if the board sees their threat failing, and there are still many Muggle-born students at school, they might remove the blindfold and let the basilisk run wild. They could always blame the chamber itself. We must move fast. They shouldn't go that far yet. Baron tried to reassure him, though his face showed no real relaxation. After all, Dumbledore won't just sit by and watch. The board lacks a backer who could directly confront Dumbledore. They will have one soon. Avada glanced around. When he was sure no one was listening, he lowered his voice. Snape confirmed to me that the mastermind behind all this is Lord Voldemort himself. Don't be surprised. You saw him splitting his soul, didn't you? He did it before, which resulted in more than one Voldemort-like presence. Each fragment of his soul could be independently resurrected, like what happened with Professor Baker. If they secretly resurrected Voldemort while occupying Hogwarts, Baron shuddered, things would be really bad. Does Dumbledore know? He does. Snape told him. That's good. Baron breathed easier. At least the situation is still under control. Wait, didn't you say Snape made an unbreakable vow to the board? How did he relay so much to you? To be honest, I don't know. He seems to be disregarding that vow. Avada's eyes showed puzzlement. If I had to guess, either he phrased the vow ambiguously to leave himself a loophole, or Dumbledore intervened in some miraculous way. All right. Baron stood. Then I'm not going home for Christmas either. I'll stay at school and help you make the spider devices. Good. Avada welcomed the help. There were hundreds of Muggle-born students, and one pair of hands wouldn't be enough. Christmas is in 3 days. If we develop the auxiliary enchantments today and place an order in Diagon Alley, we can start work tomorrow. That means making about 20 to 30 devices in 2 days. It's a lot, but doable. And don't forget distribution. Most people still believe the petrifications are the work of the Chamber's will. We'll have to convince petrified students that a basilisk was the culprit. Thankfully, the school published a list of Muggle-born students. Otherwise, our workload could double or triple. Enough talk. I'll find Kettleburn. You get to work. Good. Avada took the jar and slipped out of the crowded room. He found a quiet, empty classroom and sat down. If this device could be effectively deployed and either eradicate or greatly reduce petrifications, it would be nearly irrefutable proof of the basilisk's existence. That would force the Board of Governors to explain themselves and alarm the wider magical community. Investigators would be sent to overturn the old pipe system and drag the basilisk out, killing it. The board's conspiracy would collapse, Dumbledore could return, and the stubborn pureblood faction would be crippled. And Avada would be free to focus on researching the confession effect and extracting the soul fragment from the Horcrux diary as soon as possible. 139. The legend of the Chamber of Secrets is spreading. 2 days later, on the eve of the Christmas holiday, precisely when most students were least inclined to study, A rumor began to circulate quietly through the school, especially among the Muggle-born students. Have you heard? Salazar Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets? What's that? Listen, the legend says Salazar Slytherin hated the idea of Muggle-born witches and wizards at Hogwarts. He quarreled with the other founders and left the school. Before he left, he secretly built a Chamber of Secrets and housed a basilisk inside, so that one day his heir could return, reopen the chamber, release the beast, and purge the school of Muggle-borns. That sounds far-fetched. Didn't we hear before that basilisks are scared off by rooster crows? That didn't end well last time, did it? Someone asked Professor Binns. The legend is true. He said the chamber was opened 50 years ago and Myrtle was killed by the monster back then. So it's not a vengeful castle spirit. Someone released a creature Slytherin raised. And Slytherin's heir must have worked with the Board of Governors to modify the basilisk so it isn't scared of rooster crows anymore. They covered it up and blamed everything on the castle's will. Are you sure? Slytherin's from 1,000 years ago. Can a basilisk live that long? I checked. Basilisks have extremely long lifespans. They can live well over 1,000 years. Well, that makes it more believable. Aren't you scared? You're Muggle-born. You could be attacked any time. Heh, someone found another weakness. Spiders can sense a basilisk from a distance and react to it. I checked. That's true. So, some genius made a basilisk early warning device, and it's being handed out to Muggle-born students. I got one. Look. Holy, get it away from me. I'm terrified of spiders. Avada and his circle had intentionally released the whole Chamber of Secrets legend to lend credibility to the basilisk story. The legend had long circulated around the school, and an incident 50 years ago, the death of Myrtle, could be verified by older professors, which made the whole thing ring true. The initial version of the rumor hadn't specified that the monster was a basilisk, but Myrtle's testimony as a supposed victim, plus Avada's deliberate nudging about the basilisk and an almost conspiratorial explanation of why rooster crows no longer worked, merged the basilisk story with the chamber rumor perfectly. People began to believe again. At the same time, the basilisk early warning device, developed by Baron Avada and Professor Kettleburn with Hagrid, spread along with the gossip. To protect those involved and to keep the Horcrux diary from openly retaliating, Avada's group blurred the rumor's source as it circulated. The Weasley twins did most of the covert distribution. With their connections and knack for stirring things up, they quietly passed the devices along with ease. Avada personally placed the devices, using the G-Chi-Tianya curse, in each house's common room with a note telling Muggle-born students who planned to stay at Hogwarts for Christmas to come and collect them. Most were picked up within a day or two. It was a pity, however, that since the devices were distributed, not a single alarm had gone off. If one had, the publicity would have exploded. "Aren't you going home, Ken?" someone asked. The school compiled a list of students staying over Christmas the day before the holiday. Even in such an unusual year, Hogwarts couldn't break a 1,000-year tradition and empty the castle the way they did for summer. When Avada put his name on the list, his roommates gave him surprised looks. Few Muggle-borns were willing to stay under the circumstances. Avada smiled coolly. "I always stay for Christmas, and staying this time is my way of showing support for the Muggle-borns. I got one of those warning devices with a spider too, so even if the basilisk shows up, I'm not worried," Summers said. "Come to think of it, you were the first to suggest the thing killing people was a basilisk, weren't you? Those Rooster Crow badges were your idea back then. This device fits your theory." "It's not just fitting," Shabby said, pouting. "I think Ken made this. Pulling out something like this out of nowhere, that's so Ken." "Am I right?" someone asked. Avada only smiled, and, as expected from roommates who had lived with him 3 years, he couldn't hide it. "All right. Okay, Baron actually proposed it. I only refined the idea. This batch was rushed out in the last 2 days. But don't spread it around," he added with concern. "Slytherin's heir might really exist, and it could be anyone. So be careful." They all nodded. "If Ken developed it, we can trust it," Summers said, pleased, and pulled a delicate, palm-sized glass device from his pocket. A small black spider rested silently inside. Summers was also Muggle-born. Though he wasn't planning to stay, Avada had left him a device when he came to pick his own up. "This Christmas," Avada said, smiling, "I plan to produce warning devices for all the Muggle-born students here. That way, when the new term begins, the threat of the basilisk will be gone, and the so-called Castle cover story will collapse on its own. Wouldn't that clear Hogwarts' name?" "That's a lot of work," Stebbins sighed. "For the last 3 years, whenever the school faced a crisis, you were the one who had to deal with it, putting yourself at risk. We ordinary people couldn't do much." "We can cheer for you from behind," Shabby said. "And maybe bring food?" Summers shrugged. All right. "It's a blessing to avoid getting caught up in things we shouldn't," Avada said. "But once this is settled and Dumbledore comes back, there shouldn't be any more messes, right?" "Let's hope so," they answered, uneasy but trusting that for now, at least, they were doing what they could to keep each other safe. 140. Assassination is coming. This Christmas, aside from putting in overtime to finish the Basilisk early warning device, Avada found the break surprisingly restful. After the string of petrifications and Snape's chilling explanation, the whole of Hogwarts was on edge, more tense and oppressive than any holiday he remembered. Even the usual gift exchange, which had always been a headache for him, had been quietly downplayed. Among his friends, Baron was working late with him. Harry's polyjuice potion preparations were at a critical stage. His roommates left him alone once they knew what he was doing, and most others had chosen to go home. So, after spending half a day baking cookies and candies for classmates, friends, and the orphanage, he had nothing pressing to do. He could sleep in, recover fully, and take his time finishing the early warning device. I haven't been this comfortable in a long time," he thought as sunlight filtered in around 8 and woke him gently. He opened his eyes contentedly. The usual grit and soreness in them was gone. He stretched, crawled out from under the duvet, and let his joints pop before drawing his limbs back in, like a turtle retreating into its shell. What could be better than a warm bed on a winter morning? His stomach's protests, however, eventually convinced him to get up. "Misjudged it. Should have left something by the bed last night," he muttered. He washed, dressed, and took a detour to the kitchens, knowing the dining hall breakfast would have finished by then. As expected, he found a familiar sight. Harry and Ron hunched over a pile of food at a table. "Yo, Merry Christmas, Ron. Did you oversleep too?" Avada asked, popping a few slices of bread into the oven and spreading them with sauce. Harry and Ron looked up, surprised. "Ken?" Harry said, blinking. "You stayed at school?" Ron added. "Yeah, nothing strange about that," Avada smiled. "I'll probably be holed up in the common room most of the holiday. No reason to wander around with the petrifications. And besides, there's that early warning device now." "Oh, right." At that, Harry's face lit up. Ron's expression went a little weird. "Do you have the device with you?" he asked. Avada patted his pockets and shook his head. "No need. My senses are not bad. If the basilisk comes within range, I'll feel its life force and presence like a chill down the spine." "You have to carry one," Harry said urgently. "Yesterday I was walking with Colin Creevy, you don't know him, and the device on him went off. Then, almost immediately, I heard that sound." "He was probably chasing after you," Ron remarked while cutting butter, mercilessly exposing Harry. "That's not the point. When the alarm went off, we followed its directions, glanced at the nearest classroom, and ran in with our eyes shut," Harry said, still shaken. "We stayed there with our eyes closed for almost 10 minutes. The alarm never stopped. The sound in my ears only got clearer. I think that attack was aimed at Colin. When the alarm finally stopped and the sound in my ears faded, we ran back to the common room as fast as we could. That device really works. It proved the culprit is the basilisk." "You're Muggle-born, right? You have to carry one. The basilisk's active again, and that thing can save lives," Harry pressed. "I know." Avada nodded and pulled his bread from the oven. "I'll carry one." He felt a quiet satisfaction despite the tension. He and Baron had finally made something that worked against the basilisk, something that could protect students, something that, at least in this timeline, had finally saved Colin Creevy from harm. If word of the device's success spread, more students would be convinced the beast was a basilisk, not whatever story the chamber defenders were telling. That public opinion could shift the wider wizarding community and deal a setback to the rigid pureblood faction. He could only hope Dumbledore's plans were progressing and that someone had made arrangements to clear Snape's name if needed. "Whoever invented this is a genius," Harry said. "Hermione looked up basilisks when you made that rooster badge, and she found out spiders fear them, but none of us thought it could be used like this." "It'd be better if it wasn't spiders," Ron said with a despondent sigh. Avada had deliberately kept the manufacturing method secret. He feared countermeasures and the possibility of the device being turned against them. For now, besides him and his 3 roommates, only Baron, Fred, and George knew the details. A few people might guess who was behind it, but it was nothing that would cause complications. After breakfast and farewells, Avada headed toward the library with his bag. Even if the holiday was unusual, his homework still existed. He intended to finish all of it today and then spend the rest of the break putting his larger plan into motion. His steps slowed suddenly. In the wall just to his right, his magical senses picked up a sinuous, fiery life force sliding along the stone. At its tip glittered an intricate dark arts formation. The structure was squeezing through a crack and extending itself toward him, reaching out of the wall, aimed straight at him, and there were no protective wards or seals between him and it. "Basilisk. Want to kill me?" He didn't hurry. He kept walking, every muscle taut, his gaze fixed straight ahead, calm on the surface, ready beneath it.